Hi, in this tutorial we're going to look at integers and floats, those two data types in the C# programming language, and how to work with those in C#. If you watched the previous tutorial, what we did was we worked with strings and we created variables. So we've worked with the string data type. Now what we're going to do is work with numbers. So integers, which are whole numbers, and floats, which are numbers that have a decimal place. So what we'll do is, I've got the code here from the previous tutorial. I'm going to change it, and what I'm going to do is create a basic calculator that will add two numbers together, two numbers that the user provides. Okay, so if we wanted to create a variable that contained a number, we could simply create the variable by declaring its data type. So if it was a whole number, we could say int, and then we could say something like number equals 10. Okay, and we don't need to put the number inside quotes because it's simply just, it's an integer number. It's not a string, it doesn't need quotes. If I wanted to create a variable that contained a number with decimal places, then I could say float. I could say something like number 2 equals 10.5. Okay, so now that's a float variable. Okay, so we could do that and we could use those variables throughout the program. Alright, that's basically how to create integer and float variables. But what I'm going to show you in this tutorial is how to ask the user to enter in numbers and then treat those numbers as numbers. So to treat a number entered as either an integer or a float. So I'll get rid of that code, and what I'll do is I'll get rid of this code as well. Alright, and I'm going to change this message here. Let's get rid of the comment. I'm going to change this string here, which is displayed to the user. I'm going to change that so what it says instead is enter two numbers. Alright. Now, what we did before when we were getting data from the user was we were creating a string and we were giving it a variable name. Alright, so I'm going to call the first one num1, so we'll get the first number from the user, call it num1. And what we did in the last tutorial was we used the console.readLine method to get input from the user. Alright, and then we could go and display that back to them. Alright, now what we'll do is we'll go along with this, but just remember that numbers aren't strings. So strings are different characters like letters, words, sentences. They're not just numbers, and you can't treat a string as a number. So this needs to either be an integer or a float, depending on how we want to treat this number. So just go along with this at the moment, and then we'll look at what happens in a moment. So we'll create another one, string num2, and this will get the second number from the user. So console.readLine, and we'll get two numbers. So we're saying enter two numbers, we ask for the first number, then we ask for the second number. So the user just enters each one, hits return or enter. Alright, then what we'll do is we'll say console.writeLine num1 plus num2. Alright, we'll save that and we'll run it. Okay, so enter two numbers. First number I'll enter is 10, and I'll enter 5, so hit return. And what do we get? Well, we don't actually get those two numbers added together. 10 plus 5, we should have a result of 15. But instead, we see 10, and then we see 5. And what's happened together is because we've created variables called string, and console.readLine will return a string or store a string, what we're actually doing is putting two strings together. Alright, so num1 and num2 are just being treated as strings. They're not actually being added together. So that's why you just see 10, and then that's the first string, and then 5, that's the second string. So that's num1, and then that's num2. Okay, that's not what we want. So what we could try doing is, instead of saying string num1, maybe we could go and make it an integer by saying int. Let's see what that does. We'll run that. Well, when we click on run or build, we get errors. And on both of these lines, we're getting the same error message. It says it cannot implicitly convert type string to int or string to integer. All right, and the reason that is you can't just convert this, which is a string. So console.readLine always gets a string. All right, so it stores whatever it gets as a string. You can't just convert that implicitly from a string to an integer in the same statement like that. So that's not going to work. All right. What we can do instead is we can say int dot pass with a capital P, and then put this statement inside brackets. So we're using int dot pass method. So we'll put a bracket there, and then a closing bracket at the end. So you'll notice that we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 brackets, 2 opening, 2 closing. All right, and the error message goes away. So we could do the same thing below. Int.pass, bracket there, close the bracket, save, and now both error messages have gone away. So we can try it and run that again. We can enter two numbers, 10, hit enter, 5, hit enter, and there we go. We get the result of 15. So that works. All right. Now, what if we want to work with numbers with a decimal place? What if we enter 10.5? Well, straight away, as soon as I hit enter, we get an error message. All right. And that's because we're trying to treat this string. We're trying to convert a string to an integer. But we're not actually getting, we're not actually converting an integer, a string to an integer. We're getting a float, and it can't be converted to an integer. So sorry if that didn't make sense. What we're trying to do is convert a string to an integer, and an integer is a whole number. However, what's being received here, what it's trying to convert is a float to an integer, and it just can't be done. So what we can do instead is we can say float pass, or float.pass, and we're also trying to store it as an integer variable, so we can't do that as well if it's a float. So what we need to say is float.pass, and we also need to make this a variable of the float data type. So we can say float num1 equals float.pass, console.readline, and so on, and the same with num2. And that, right now we can save that. We can stop this from running. Okay, it didn't actually stop running, it just kind of died on us. So we can stop that from running, save it, run it again. All right, now we can enter something like 10.5 and maybe 6.3. And there we go, we get the answer of 16.8. So now we're working with floats. All right, so that is how to take a string and convert it to an integer, and also how to take a string and convert it to a float. All right, now we've looked at string variables, we've looked at integer variables, and now we've looked at float variables. One thing I'll quickly cover is some operators that we can use. So we've already used the addition or plus operator. If we wanted to multiply two numbers, we could put a star or asterisk. So now if we put 10 and 5, it should say 50. All right, so 10 times 5. We can do divide, which is a forward slash. All right, so 10 divided by 5 is 2. All right, and we could also do minus. All right, so 10 minus 5 is 5. All right, so those are the basic arithmetic operators. There are other operators that we can use as well, like mod, modulus, and we'll look at those in other tutorials. That's it for this tutorial. Thanks for watching.